Thank you for applying to be in our language class and for trusting me with your proficiency. This is a quick overview of maybe what to expect in the language learning process. A quick agenda for the presentation. First, we will look at the stages of acquiring your first language. How do children naturally acquire languages? And then we're going to look at stages of second language acquisition. How do you learn a new language? Methods for teaching Indigenous languages or second languages. Language learning, first language acquisition, and then methods we will be using and how to evaluate your language and what that might look like. So, stages of first language acquisition. We've all seen children, babies, grow up and learn to speak a language, usually English, is what would be normalized for us. For about 6 to 9 months, they may go through a silent stage where they don't speak, but they may do a little bit of cooing. And then they get into a babbling stage where they're doing lots of babbling, but there's no real comprehensible words yet, although they may have a comprehension of the language, understand, even though they're not speaking yet. Then they'll start to put their first words, 1 or 2, up to 10 single words. Then they'll be putting 2 words together to describe a certain idea or a want or a need. After that, they'll get into the telegraphic or multi-word stage, in which they'll be putting multiple words together. There may be grammatical or pronunciation errors, but they will be understood. After that, they get into the beyond telegraphic stage, where they really start to get conversational and have a good grasp of the grammar. Stages of second language acquisition. When you've already learned a language, for us, we've learned English and we're acquiring Gitwangax as our second language acquisition, as our second language. I know it's odd referring to your own language as your second language, but this is the process for learning a new language. It might be your third or fourth or fifth language, but it's still called your second language for some reason. Anything after your first language is your second language. So, pre-production. This is similar to first language acquisition in that it is a silent stage. There'll be minimal comprehension that might not be verbalized. They may have yes, no's, but you're not going to be speaking much in that first. It's kind of a silent stage. Early production. You may have 1 or 2 word responses, understand how to say things in the present tense, but limited is very limited. After you get through that, you're going to start to emerge as a speaker. Decent comprehension, putting words together into sentences. There will still be grammatical and pronunciation errors, but you will be understood. And then you may emerge as an intermediate level speaker. Excellent comprehension, you'll make less grammatical errors and be able to start stringing sentences together before you can emerge as advanced fluency or an advanced level speaker. To achieve a native-like speaking proficiency, it would be hard to distinguish a first language speaker from an advanced second language speaker. So to summarize, this is the natural order in which people acquire a language. They listen for a year or so, or they have a silent stage. Then they emerge as a speaker, and after being immersed in the language for 6 or 7 years, 5 to 7 years, they're already fairly fluent, and you introduce the writing system, reading and writing. So when we teach a language or when you're learning a language, it has to ideally follow this model and the natural order in which people acquire language. Sometimes we start with reading and writing the written language and expect it to bridge over to speaking and listening, but it doesn't always work like that. Language learning versus language acquisition. They sound pretty similar, and the definitions can be pretty similar, and sometimes it's hard to get your mind around what the difference is. So language learning, the process of actively trying to learn a language, the process of actively trying to understand a language. Language acquisition is the process of gaining language knowledge naturally. Again, this goes back to following that natural order in which people will acquire language, as well as using our own language, the Gitsan language, to teach the Gitsan language, not using English to teach the Gitsan language, and not jumping back and forth with translations or using the English language to acquire the Gitsan language. It's trying to do it as natural as possible. So there are many different methods that we can use to learn, acquire, or teach the Gitsan language, and they all seem to be rooted in the theory of second language acquisition. The first one is TPR, or total physical response. It's a method of teaching, it's a teacher-driven method, and it uses a lot of actions, and it's great technique. It's a great method for teaching language at the beginner level. And building onto that, total physical response storytelling. When you're asking a little more questions and answers, and the activity, the physical activity you're doing is going to be kind of serve as a story. It builds into a story using questions and answers to build proficiency, a bit of more of an intermediate level. There's 2 TPRS methods that use the same acronym. The next one is teaching proficiency through reading and storytelling. I found this method kind of has a lot of English translations too, and there's some great techniques in there, but the English all over the screen kind of holds you back from thinking in the target language. Mentor-apprentice program. This is a learner-driven method. A learner-driven method where pairs one speaker and one learner, and you can spend 300 hours together. It's a bit of a mysterious program. You don't just magically emerge as a speaker. It's a learner-driven method, so it's not a fit for everybody, but it is a great program. Where are your keys? This method uses a lot of sign language and games to get to the target language. Racius method. I think they use a lot of drama. I'm not too familiar with it. I haven't had training on it yet, but I would love to. Accelerated second language acquisition by Stephen Gray Morning, one of the few language teaching methods developed by an Indigenous person. He's very protective over his intellectual property, so I don't know too much about it other than they use pictures. Root word method. This is used by the Mohawk, a very highly effective method for their beginner level speakers, and it's built for polysynthetic languages. Gitsan is not a polysynthetic language, unfortunately, so this method won't work for us. Direct acquisition method by Paul Creek. This one is an entire curriculum in addition to a method. And I find when you directly translate a curriculum from one language to another, it's a little odd. Sometimes it was a little odd and a little restricting. It's developed for people that don't have language speakers, nations that don't really have language speakers, and the teacher just has to stay one step ahead of the students. So that's one of its strengths, I would say, for languages that are in very dire situations. The domain method is awesome, slowly taking over spaces in your house or your activities in your daily routine and replacing it for the target language, which for us is some Algyax. These are some of the methods that we can bring into the classroom. I don't think we're going to bring them all in equally, but there's definitely strengths in each one of them, and we're going to mesh it together somehow and see how we can create an effective language program for adults. We will be mostly leaning into where are your keys, some TPR. Where are your keys also pulls elements from TPRS. So does direct acquisition. And the domain method will be kind of like a homework assignment, a way of getting the language out of the four walls of the classroom and into the home without making extra time for language learning. Bringing language to your daily routine, which you're already doing. what to expect for language learning. I know we've kind of gone over the language acquisition process, but we're going to delve into it from a different angle here. A lot of people come into this with the goal, I want to be conversational, I want to be fluent, but unless you've learned a language or two already, it's hard to know exactly what that looks like and what to expect. So there's different ways of looking at this question. So the Foreign Services Institute, it's an American institute, has taken the world languages and compartmentalized them into 5 different categories. Category 1 being the easiest language to acquire, and category 5 being the most difficult languages to acquire. And this is given that English is your first language. So if English is your first language, we look at category 1. It may take up to 24 weeks or 600 hours to acquire, I imagine, an intermediate level proficiency in any one of these languages. That works out to about 25 hours a week for all these categories. Category 2 would be 750 hours for German, 900 hours for some of this Indonesian, Malaysian, and Swahili languages. There's quite a few languages in category 4, which they say it has significant linguistic and or cultural differences from English. So it could take up to 1,100 hours to acquire a lot of these languages if English is your first language. And category 5 is the most difficult languages to acquire if English is your first language. Some of these languages include Arabic, Cantonese, Mandarin, Japanese, and Korean. Most native North American languages will also fit into this category 5, taking up to 2,200 hours to achieve probably an intermediate level of fluency. Keep in mind that this course is aiming for 336 hours. It is a lifelong journey, and it's a big commitment. And it is so rewarding. It's really beautiful to experience the world through our own language. What is fluency? When people start learning language, or when people are language learning, often I hear, I want to be a fluent speaker. That's my goal. I want to be fluent. I often get asked, are you a fluent speaker? Like that's a yes or no question. And it's not doesn't seem to be a common understanding of what is fluency, how is fluency acquired, and what does it look like. So we go home and learn all these words in the dictionary, and that's not always the best because you can't really do anything with it. You can't be comfortable in a conversation between a language learner and another language learner, or a language learner and a language teacher. And so that's the goal, is to be comfortable in a small conversation when you're going to the store or when you're in the house or wherever you may be. Conversational. And how do we evaluate fluency? How do we see how fluent we are? This diagram was developed by ACTFL, the American Council for the Teaching of Foreign Languages. It is the rating scale. It looks at proficiency from a scale rather than fluent, non-fluent, or semi-fluent. It breaks down fluency or proficiency into 5 main categories: novice, intermediate, advanced, superior, and distinguished. Even in English, I don't think I would consider myself to be a distinguished speaker. I think a lot of us will be starting at some level of novice, and for us the goal is to get to an intermediate level of speaking. There is often this intermediate plateau where people get stuck at and have a hard time bridging the gap from an intermediate level speaker to an advanced level speaker. But there is a lot of really great examples of getting people to that intermediate level anyways, and we're going to talk more about that in a minute and what that looks like. Some people like evaluations to be very measurable. Sometimes this is measured in the amount of hours spent in immersion, and sometimes it is measured by the amount of words and phrases that may have been acquired. More importantly than memorizing words and phrases is internalizing the language and knowing what you can do with that. What can you do with that language? Can it serve you? Can you use it when you need to use it? The direct acquisition method by Paul Creek is a good example because they're so organized. All their lessons are kind of beautifully organized. After the first book, you know 500 words, 300 sentences, and you will have completed X amount of hours in an immersion environment. And so it's very measurable. They've also taken ActFill and broken it down into, we'll go to the next slide. So, evaluation tools. There's the American Council for the Teaching of Foreign Languages, ActFill, which is really amazing because it's so comprehensive and it's so well recognized from universities to governments, and it works beautifully across languages. But it is really comprehensive, more comprehensive than it needs to be. So for the Paul Creek curriculum, they adapted it, and I've seen it used in the First Nations school system as well. I'm not sure if they're still using it, but it's the First Nations language assessment benchmarks based on ActFill. And then Where Are Your Keys has simplified ActFill even more, which I love, with a little method called Travels with Charlie. So this is Travels with Charlie. It is a method from Where Are Your Keys that takes ActFill and breaks it down to a fun story using your hand. So there's 5 main language proficiencies, and you have 5 fingers. So let's hold your hand up and start with the pinky. Novice. Your ring finger is intermediate. Your middle finger is advanced. Your pointer fingers superior, and the thumb is distinguished. Again, from pinky to thumb: novice, intermediate, advanced, superior, distinguished. So let's start with novice, the pinky, or Tarzan. Well, what can Tarzan do? Tarzan can beat on his chest. Tarzan may have a lot of memorized words and phrases. He may know 100,000 words, but he can't really put them together to make sentences or conversations. Me, Tarzan, you, Jane. It's kind of the extent of his language skills, even if he may know a lot of words. That is the novice, an example of a novice speaker. Get to the party, an intermediate level speaking. Ring, 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 hello. There's a party happening. Oh, okay, well, where is the party? When is the party? Who's all going to be at the party? What am I going to wear? What should I wear? What are you going to wear? Should I bring anything? A lot of question and answer kind of dialogue, but it's getting that language to be able to get to the party, dressed appropriately, bringing the right things at the right time, at the right place. Can you do it in the target language? Mostly present tense. What happened at the party? Well, let's say Tarzan got out of control. We're talking about the past tense. He came to the party last night and he got out of control and he was throwing couches out the window. Well, the cops came and arrested him, took him downtown, and then he called me this morning, present tense, and asked if I could bail him out of jail. Well, I don't have the money, so I'm going to have to call my mom, future tense, and ask to borrow the money. Wherever that conversation may go of what happened at the wild party last night, past, present, future tense, you have the language to be able to tell how it went. Unpredictable conversation. Comfortably with past, present, future tense and great grammatical structure. What if parties were illegal? That would be a superior level speaker. somebody who could look at the situation from a bird's eye view or a God's eye view and say, we'll talk about what are the implications on society? How would this impact our community? And are the reasons for it being illegal? What are some objective reasons for it to be illegal? And what type of punishments would be in place? And are they too harsh? And can you talk about things from an objective level, at a higher level, issues in society in the target language? I think for us, we're just trying to get to the party. If you could just get to the party, like, that would be amazing in the target language making. That's the big goal, is to get people to an intermediate level of fluency through a lot of Indigenous language programs. And getting people from the intermediate level fluency to an advanced level fluency seems to be a bit more mysterious. I just wanted to thank you all for applying for the language program, and I hope it might be a fit for you. I know it is a big time commitment, and it's a challenge for people to look at putting 3 nights a week for the language, but I really think it's worth it, and it's so empowering to be able to speak your own language and to experience the world through our own language. Is just so beautiful. This course, I don't know if it'll be enough to get you to the party after 300 hours, probably not, but it'll be a great start, and I believe you will be emerging as a speaker, maybe not a fluent, but a high beginner level speaker. And so I'm really looking forward to being on this language journey with you, and I hope you can give it your all, because you will get out just as much as you put in, and I'm really looking forward to seeing your fluency evolve. Gabit.